morning, Julie Koehrer.
Good morning, Jason Padgett. How are you?
Good. I was stoked the other day. I ran into your boss, Jim Stone, on my territory down here in Carmel. I was like, whoa, I only ever see you in Lafayette.
Right? It's almost like you can't really recognize people when you see them out of their routine, you know?
Yes. You know, the only other time I ran into him at the 500 of all places with millions of people. We bumped into each other. But
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool.
so I want to get rocking and rolling here because I have a lot of fun questions. I want to go do kind of a yin and yang because there's the negativity about AI is growing, and
Uh-huh.
I have some theories around why that is and how that narrative could change. But I want to run some things by you.
Oh boy. Okay.
Just kind of get your. This is almost me interviewing you today, right? So
Oh, good. Okay.
first off, there's been some violence, even here in our home state of Indiana. On April 6th, City Councilman Ron Gibson's house received 13 rounds of gunfire at 12:45 a.m. with a note left on his doorstep that said, "No data centers."
Right. Okay.
Want someone
I'm never going to be one that says violence is an answer for anything. So,
agreed. I
yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Then you take Sam Altman, and Sam has had historically there've been a lot of questions about Sam's ethics. He was fired by the board and then brought back. One of the biggest arguments then was that he told people what they wanted to hear, both internally and externally, and then did whatever he needed to do. So there's been some questions around him being untruthful, dishonest, and somewhat of a sociopath when it comes to business. And so a couple of very well known New Yorker writers wrote a hit piece on him that came out that same day, April 6th. And April 10th, somebody threw a Molotov cocktail at his house while he and his husband and son were home. And I'm just like, wow, really? This is the Luddites burning down the factories, right? Only they're going for people instead of machines this
It's
time.
gives you French Revolution kind of vibes, doesn't it? It gives you some people are angry. I will never say that violence is an answer to anything, but people are angry.
AI is as popular in the United States based on current polling as ice, and ice is not very popular in the United States. And I'm not
Yeah.
against one, but they're like 23% of Americans have a positive outlook on AI, and I think personally it's because of the narrative that these big companies are spinning. Both Dario and Sam, if you look at Mythos, which is this new model that was released that they couldn't release because it figures out how to break all kinds of encryption codes and expose a bunch of bugs. So they're going to hold on to it and then let like 20 big companies fix all their stuff and then maybe release it to us. And Dario also has said repetitively that at least 50% of white collar work will be gone in the next couple of years. Sam has said the whole world is basically going to have to pay him for compute, and that they're going to license intelligence. So they're telling us that we are all going to be, or most of us are going to be jobless, and they're almost narcissistically positioning themselves as the philosopher kings on Plato's Republic, where we will all just get universal basic income. We don't need to worry about it. Like, we'll be taken care of. There'll be an abundance of a world of abundance, but the smart people will rule the world, and the rest of us can just figure out, some purposeful stuff to do. We won't have to do our tedious work anymore, which is just the worst narrative most
Yeah.
disconnected narrative you could possibly spin.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I know that, and I always get his name wrong, but Anthropic, what is his name again?
Dario Amodei.
Dario. Even he recently, at least I was fed, a news article about it, but he recently came out and said if it was up to him, he would have gone the route of curing cancer and other diseases before releasing things like ChatGPT. And not a knock to those sort of, just as he's just saying if it was up to him, he would have rolled out AI differently and started with all the beneficial stuff and then moved into, work related stuff, agents and whatnot.
And in many ways, I like Dario, but I'm having real trouble maintaining my composure right now because
Okay.
such a back ass bullshit cop out answer. Demis Hassabis has gone the route of
That's what
curing.
I think it was. It was Demis. I said
Oh, well,
Anthropic, but it was
yeah, you're right. And Demis
the
has,
fold guy, the AlphaFold guy.
yes, yes, okay.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
that's my
Dario
bad.
is Anthropic and Claude.
Yeah,
And
I'm sorry. It was the
so,
AlphaFold gentleman who said that. Yeah.
yeah, and Demis is right, Demis is right, and he has stuck to that, and it is, not as profitable right out of the gate. However, arguably, it could be more profitable. I mean, if you're competing with Eli Lilly because of drug discovery, you've got a pretty decent business model, right? And I think that gets to another topic I want to bring up. But before we do,
Yeah.
like, I do think that people are starting to think that the way that they can compete against, the way they can actually stop AI development as states, is to get these moratoriums on data centers. And Maine has already passed through their legislation and it's gone to the governor's desk, an 18-month no data centers bill here. But here's my problem with that is you're just going to make your state behind the states like New Hampshire, which currently has a bill proposal in there to change their constitution, add to their constitution a constitutional right to freely leverage and use compute. Like, essentially, compute free or die, just like they're live free or die. Like, they are 100% like, no, come here, build here. We want our people to have access to this stuff. We want to build this stuff. And what you'll end up with is people bitching about the have-nots versus the haves, when the have-nots caused their own problem because they refused to use it and refused to build it, and the haves embraced it. That's where I see a disconnect at the boots on the ground level.
I I don't disagree with any of that. I think, in my perspective, if it came out as a regulated thing, I think this would be a whole different discussion, right? Because, like you said, the narrative, you're right. The narrative, as much as I think they think it's this great thing, like you'll have UBI and whatever, but they're also saying you're useless. I think that is not a good look, not a helpful, and the education or miseducation or misinformation, whatever you want to call it, around the water usage, the environmental effects, people's electric bills going up, all of these things they're chasing after, which is always my problem here, is we're very reactive here, as in the country, the United States, our current states. We are always reactive. We are reactive in healthcare. We are reactive in all these things. Whereas if there was a conversation ahead of time, and we all collaboratively, so to speak, we're on the same page with regulating this, rolling it out in drips instead of, just mass consumption because that's the best way to program it, whatever the case may be. I feel like, and I don't know because we can never go back in time, but I feel like if there was more conversation ahead of time, we've been programming AI for a long time. CAPTCHAs, all those like pictures and stuff where you were forced to do it to get into your own bank account, like that's programming AI. And we didn't know that, so it's that trust, right? So it kind of, once trust is broken, how do you come back from that?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm going to say something pro Trump right now because I know neither one of us are happy with a lot of things he's done. Right, so we'll leave. This is not. But one of the things that I've seen this administration do that I thought was brilliant was the $1,000 bank account for every newborn. That is that is an investment in the S&P 500. So essentially, what they're offering is every newborn child in the United States an account that's invested in basically like a 401k from birth, that's invested in the S&P 500, which then incentivizes two things. One, well, it's a safety blanket for Social Security, so they actually build like equity over time and don't have to rely on Social Security, which is brilliant. But the other side of that is it encourages them, as they invest in this or their parents invested it, to invest in these American companies that are part of the S&P 500, and it encourages them to be pro American business because the more these S&P 500 companies grow, the more that account grows over their lifetime and the more their retirement's worth. That's the kind of buy-in conversation that we need to have with these AI companies. If my company is deploying mass scale AI, they need to be having conversations about how that profit sharing is going to trickle down. down? How does not just a few people get rich off of all this stuff, and everybody, not based on some UBIs, or like here's your allowance. No, I want to know, like, what's my buy-in? What do I get in return for the investment of time and energy that I'm putting in to help you build this system out?
I don't disagree. However, I think if we got a peek behind the curtain on how that all actually works, it's a grift. And I say that because if you look at the people funding it, there is a back end benefit to the Dell people who are doing all of that. So if it was structured in which the way that you are saying and the story that is being told on the surface, I agree. Um, but I don't believe that that's actually what's happening with that currently. I'm not saying that that is wrong. I just don't think that that's the full
We can agree that that model is something that we need. Like, we all need buy into this AI,
buy-in.
and we all need a return on our buy-in. Like, sure, I'll let you put it on my keyboard so that the AI gets trained on my job, but I want like 1% of this company, or like this startup that I have gone with, Citizen AI, right? I have like this minute amount of stock share. It's like 0.000 something that I get by coming onto the company as one of the original members. Does that mean anything right now? No, but what it does mean is, if I help them and they go to market and they sell at like a multi-million dollar, become a multi-million dollar company, all of a sudden I get a whole bunch of return on it. So that incentivizes me personally not to try to get raises, like that's another thing, but to see this company succeed so that I can financially gain from it. That's what we need with AI, is every American citizen that's possible, or that is touching their lives, how do they get some kind of return if they help automate things, uh, and long-term return, right? Like,
Yeah,
how does that happen? And we don't have those conversations at all.
we don't have those conversations, and I understand it's difficult to communicate with all, however hundreds of millions of people are in the US. But you're right. I do. If there was buy-in and investment and inclusion, whatever, I think it would be a very different approach.
People like things done with them, not to them.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Oh, and I mean, and that's such an American thing, right? Like, don't tell me what to do. Like that is such an ingrained, like kind of spirit here. So
I'm laughing because my mind immediately went to my 15-year-old daughter, and then the finger pointed back at me. I got
that's funny.
just as
I thought
guilty.
about my mother, my 82-year-old mother, who is like, not in the best health, but still like, don't tell me what to do. It's like, okay, you're only hurting yourself, but okay, like it's funny.
Well, that's a perfect shift.
Yeah.
That,
Oh,
bringing that up is a perfect shift to something that's happening in Las Vegas on Memorial Day, which
okay.
is the Enhanced Games, a version of the Olympic Games where all bets are off. You can use any type of augmented body parts or drug therapy or what. Yeah, so, like, there's this whole other class of people who are working on like living forever, and who really.
With longevity, biohacking, all that.
Yes. Well, so there's this Sid is something, I can't say his last name. I believe it's an Indian last name, but I heard a story and I looked into it, and so he had stage 4 cancer, and he was told by every medical professional he ever talked to that it was uncurable. He hired a team of researchers. This guy obviously is very wealthy, and scientists, and through technology and AI and biohacking, he has been in remission for going on 2 years now.
Amazing.
So he may have cured his cancer leveraging technology. So, all that to say, like, I want to ask you what I heard on a podcast. I want to ask you some of the. Let's just assume all that stuff's going to work out, right? So, first off, let me frame my how I look at this. I look at this in the same way that I refuse to look at Pascal's wager. So I'm not religious, right? But there's a wager called Pascal's wager, which eventually says, or essentially says, to put effort into believing in God, and by that they mean Judeo-Christian God, right? If you're wrong, you have nothing to lose. But if you
Mhm,
don't believe in him, you have everything to lose. So you might as well believe in him, right?
mhm, mhm.
I feel like is a kind of a bullshit cop out, but that's just that's just my opinion.
I have
Okay.
heard, yeah, I didn't know what it was called. Thank you for giving me a, I have definitely heard that in my life. Yeah.
Yes, and I wonder how that ties into Pet Cemetery because his name was Pascal, and I'm sure there's some type of Stephen King must have Pascal must have placed a wager there. But anyhow, that's a weird side note. I love 80s movies. So my Pascal's wager with longevity is I don't think that I will live to see extended life. Like I feel like that's probably if I had a time frame 30, 40 years before we start really seeing the kind of benefits of like mass disease cure. We may hit or miss, like maybe I'll get mouth cancer from chewing tobacco and in 5 years they figure out how to cure that based on techniques and science and I got lucky. But that doesn't mean they're gonna cure all cancer and figure out how to reverse aging and all that. That seems a bit down the road. But by the same token, I do have that in the back of my mind now. Like I'm 53 years old, right? So I have for a long time wanted to lose weight, wanted to get my hip fixed because I don't really want to be miserable until I die. And right as I get old, I don't want to be. We've both seen our mothers be miserable, and it's hard for me not to tear up when I talk about mine. But sorry, my mother died of Parkinson's, and it was miserable. And it was a moment where I said, holy shit, not everybody just dies of a heart attack in their sleep. Like, I do not want to go out with 3 years. So I'm trying to work toward being healthier for that reason. But now in the back of my mind as well is this, well, if they figure out this longevity thing and I end up living to like 130, like, I definitely don't want to be 300 pounds and limping around and miserable there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think it's a interesting, risky phenomenon, but I do think, I do think we're on the precipice of like, I think they're going to do things like, because so some cancers, and I learned this from a friend of mine who's lived with stage 4 cancer for a very long time, because at some point it shifts into, instead of like a death sentence, it turns into a chronic illness, right? Is what they kind of, whatever. And I do think we're going to see some of those things come along first, Crohn's, like just autoimmune stuff. Um, but I still think we're probably 10, 15 years from that. But you're right. And I, as somebody who lives with an autoimmune and who's somebody who's very much on preventative and again, relatable, watching my mother, what I would consider suffer a bit, like, I don't want that for myself. I also don't know if I want to live to 130. Like, this is like a weird, it's a really weird thing, right? Because I know we're already seeing longer lives, period. There's much more people passing at 100 than there had been previous, like even when I was little, right? Like, so it's very, very interesting. I'm excited for potential for people's overall well-being. I am very excited about that. But I'm also like, woof, the like people that want to like live forever, kind of like, no, thank you. I don't think I want that.
That was my first question. If you could
Yeah.
live forever, would you?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. But it's interesting. And I think you and I may or may not kind of align with some of this stuff. My thought process is always like, we are very obviously made of energy and molecules and particles and all of these things. So my firm belief is that energy does something when the overall shell passes, right? And I don't know where it goes or what happens or anything like that, but like I feel like there's eternalness in the energy that lives on. But I don't think I could live forever. Do you? I think that would be suffer. I think that would be suffering in some ways.
I don't know. I mean, I've always been fascinated by vampires since I was a little kid. I don't believe in that kind of shit, right? But I've always been fascinated by the idea. And to me, the exchange for eternal life there was like soul damnation, and you could only live at night, and you can't have sex, and you don't like food. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to trade off for eternal life. If as a vampire, if somebody was just to come to me and say, "We figured out how like a longevity drug that essentially will allow you to live forever," it would be a very difficult choice for me. I don't know that I would have to sit with that the same way I would probably go sit under the Bodhi tree if I knew I was going to die tomorrow. I would have,
Right.
I would have to literally like sit in meditation with that for an extended period of time before I made that decision.
Yeah, and I can understand that. And I could agree with that too, because it just. But like you said, I mean, the flip side of that coin is if I knew I was going to die tomorrow, like that feels just as anxiety inducing. I don't know. It's interesting.
It's interesting because I don't disagree with you that energy is neither created nor destroyed, and we dissipate, and you could there are all kinds of reincarnation and reformation things that I can like understand and say maybe that's plausible. But the fact of the matter death is death. Like
That
even
is
if all that shit happens, we have no idea afterward. This ends at some point in time. So if you tell me this doesn't end at some point in time, I really have to think about whether or not I want that to go. But here's the flip side to it. Let's say they could upload your consciousness, and you're about to die tomorrow, or you're gonna die in 6 months, but you give up that 6 months of life to have your consciousness uploaded so that you're more or less like exist in the digital world. Would you go for that?
I don't know because I don't know what the digital world looks like, right? Like, but it's interesting because we are again on the precipice of this, and you and I talk about it frequently, possible divide, right? Because AI is gonna do what it's gonna do, and we're gonna need to like scroll less and do these things, and kind of this digital world and plane is gonna exist or already does. So like that's I don't know because if things aren't tangible, like if my consciousness is still there, but if things aren't tangible, if I can't experience love the way that I can as a human, there would have to be a lot of I'd have to ask a lot of questions to understand what that would mean.
Which would all be theoretical. So this goes to one of the other questions, and I think this shows the my the edges of my explorer ability or my adventures. So if they discovered another planet that was a mirror of Earth and looked like New Zealand, it was definitely inhabitable, like, and you got an offer to go, but you couldn't come back, would you take that? And my answer is yes, but my answer is no to the upload because I can't even contemplate the Tron world. I have a feeling it's the same thing as death, right? I like I have a feeling that whatever I am here, I wouldn't understand there. So it's the end of this existence, and therefore I'd rather have that 6 months to spend with the people that I love than be in Tron World or the Matrix or whatever. Because I seriously doubt I would even realize I was there. It would be just so different that it's incomprehensible. But would I hop on a spaceship and go inhabit a new planet? Fuck yeah. Excuse my language. I shouldn't have said that. Beep it out. YouTube doesn't like that word, but
Oh,
yes,
that's right.
I think that would be amazing. I think it would be amazing to go check out and colonize a new planet.
It's very interesting because as the Artemis 2 whole thing has happened and the pictures are incredible, and I don't know if you followed that at all. The I never thought I would be so nerded out on some NASA stuff, but I definitely have. Um, but I'm like terrified of the idea of going to space, of being in a little container, of the what oh no, now my brain's whatever what they're reacclimating, like that whole they had video this time of them when they were returning and what that impact kind of looks like. That is scary stuff. So I don't know that I could get past those little silly fears enough to do that. I don't know. I just don't know. I
I'll-
think oh
I'm
god.
100% with you on all that, but let's just say we were in like alien time, like where they could just cryo freeze you for the trip to the other planet, and then you'd wake up there. Would you leave here and not come
Yeah,
back and go
if
there?
I didn't have to know about it, yes.
High
Yeah.
five. I'm with you. It'd be exciting. And I'm
Yeah.
sure there'd be new diseases and new animals and new deaths. And it would be like the pioneer days for real, but we'd have some probably sophisticated tools to help us with it. But that kind of adventure seems really cool.
It is. And actually, I'm really glad you brought some of this stuff up because I was served an email this week because, I work in radio. So, like, you get these emails that are press releases and wanting you to interview people. And I'm going to apologize because I'm going to get it wrong. But I was served an email that was a potential interview for somebody about the fact that, like, currently there is a very high number of people who are using AI to diagnose themselves or to prove a medical provider wrong or whatever the case may be. Because people do, there's this gap where people feel like they're not getting heard or understood or whatever in the medical field. So now they're turning to AI. And I thought of you, and I'll have to like forward you that email. I can't recall all the numbers, but I was like, oh, that's really interesting because people are already trusting it seemingly in some ways more than doctors.
I think they feel like it pays more attention to them. You can upload your entire medical history and it will actually read through it. The doctor says they did, but they probably just glanced through it, is what what most people would assume. I can't say that's true of every doctor, but I mean, we know they're overworked, and so I mean, it makes sense to me.
I mean, I honestly read it and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm honestly not surprised. I'm just not.
That'd be fun. That'd be a fun
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah, I can't remember who. I'll send you the email just so that you see it because I was like, what is this? But yeah, it goes right along with what we're talking about though.
So here's the last,
Mhm.
which is gonna may happen in your life. It will happen in your lifetime. It's may happen in my lifetime, which is brain computer interface. When they start being able to, because we're not going to be able to keep up. Like, and this is a conversation. I like this is where I my techno thing, like I where I am a little sci-fi. I don't think we'll be able to keep up with the systems that we're building without somehow augmenting our mind so that it can so that we're somewhat of a hybrid computation in here. I'm not worried about whether or not we get cyborg arms and can pick up cars and shit like that. But thought wise, like they're the brain computer interface, I do think may be the next step of evolution of human beings, and may cause a bifurcation in the species, the same way that leaving trees did, when we were apes, into hominids and things like that. But if that was if 100,000 people had successfully done it, and you were offered, would you do it?
Oh. I wouldn't. No, I'm not interested in that. I will let myself, my brain wear out as it should, as it's supposed to.
I assume that would be that. This one's a hell yes for me. But I do think that you and I probably agree that what we're headed for is the Jeff Goldblum problem in Jurassic Park, where he talks about the fact that when you tinker with Mother Nature, it rarely works out in your favor or the way you think that it's going to.
Yeah.
Will be interesting.
Mother Nature always wins. If you think about it, right? Like Mother Nature always wins, you know? But have you heard, and it is kind of a social media thing, but have you heard anything about this idea of solar punk?
No.
So this is a utopian world. I'm going to send you some of these. This is an idea that's coming from people who are talking about an integration of technology, nature, and humans, and how it can be this really beneficial, used in the right way, whatever the case may be. But it is a whole movement right now on social media. It's like a whole solar punk thing, and it's very interesting. And it's talking about truly helping everything work together. So there's not like this like AI or human, this or that. Like it can all merge together and it can all benefit each other. And I think it's interesting. I'll send you some of that.
Good. It's a harmonious ecosystem enabled by AI, which I actually heard a speaker from Australia talk about this in San Francisco a year ago when I was out there for the Human Plus AI conference. And essentially, what they're trying to do, they have a startup down in Australia that is decipher the language, more or less, with the thoughts and language of plants and animals and all these different species, and then they get a little crackpotty and like wanting to give them a digital wallet and give them kind of a vote in how the world's run. So like, the oak tree. I can't get this easement across my property because the oak tree voted no, according to AI. Like, to me, that's a little bit crazy. But I think what you're alluding to is more of how do we optimize a system where everybody is equally beneficial to it, and that kind of thing, that kind of computation, AI is amazing at.
Yeah. And that has been my takeaway. My sister just brought it to my attention. So I'm like just starting to familiarize myself with it. But yeah, it's it makes sense to me. It's that you and I have talked about it many times. It's using it in a good way, in a way for good or whatever the case may be. And, we'll just, we can do nothing but sit and wait, right? Like, that's what it feels like, at least.
The thumbnail for this episode is definitely going to have you as a solar punk.
Okay. All right. My sister will be proud.
Oh, well, thank you, Julie. This has been, I knew it would be a fun conversation. It is. I do hope that the conversation can begin to shift publicly to the point where we're starting to talk about how everyone can benefit. I think it's, yes, I would love to see the entirety of the plants and animals and the planet, but first we just need to shift it to like, how do Americans as a society benefit from this technology rather than just a handful of billionaires who, again, think that they're going to be the philosopher kings and rule over us in a way that we'll be grateful for, because that is a bullshit message.
That is a bullshit message. Agreed. Agreed.
Great week.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.